My boyfriend broke up with me. For the dumbest reason. After I supported him for years, but he forgot the house is in my name. And now he's living in his car. Before watching the video, write where you're watching it in the comments, subscribe and like so that more people can watch this video. Enjoy. I'm shaking just writing this out because the whole thing feels surreal. My name's Lauren. I'm 30 years old, female. For the past 6 years, I was with Kyle, 32, male. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was someone I carried on my back through every setback, every bad break. For his excuse, he used to keep himself from standing on his own. And I took it. I worked overtime shifts to pay bills when he couldn't keep a job. I covered his car repairs. I cooked, cleaned, kept the house running. I told myself it was love, that he'd eventually see how much I believed in him and rise to the occasion. And maybe part of me liked being needed. I thought one day we'd look back on the struggle and laugh. I thought I was building something. But turns out I was just building a safety net for him to lounge in. Here's the thing. The house we lived in? Mine. Bought it 3 years ago, in my name only, because his credit was shot. He was between jobs, his words, when we signed the papers. I remember standing in the kitchen that first night, so staring at the keys, thinking, finally, stability. We even toasted with cheap champagne. I told him, this is our fresh start. He said, yeah, babe, our castle. But deep down, I knew it was mine. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago. We're in the middle of dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and a bottle of wine, and out of nowhere he says, I think we should break up. Just like that. I thought he was joking because he said it so casually. But no, he was serious. His reason? And I swear I'm not making this up. He said, you baby me too much. It makes me feel emasculated. This from the man who once cried because I asked him to call the internet company himself instead of me doing it. I sat there staring at him, fork frozen in midair, trying to process. 6 years of support, of being his built-in mom, cheerleader, financial cushion, and he dumps me because I was too supportive. I didn't even fight back. Something in me just shut off. He kept talking about how he needed to find himself and live independently, while eating the meal I cooked in the house I paid for. That was the moment I realized this man didn't just take me for granted. He genuinely believed I was his problem. I told him fine. If he wants independence, he can start tonight. He blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. Then I reminded him the lease, the deed, the mortgage, none of it had his name. It's all mine. I watched the color drain from his face, and that, Reddit, was the start of the most chaotic 2 weeks of my life. So after I told Kyle the house wasn't his, he laughed at first. This weird, nervous chuckle like he thought I was bluffing. Come on, Lauren, don't be dramatic, he said. Dramatic. That word burned through me. 6 years of unpaid emotional labor, stills with my name on them, groceries bought with my overtime pay. And now I was dramatic for pointing out reality. I pulled out the folder I keep in the desk drawer. The deed, the mortgage statement, the property tax bill. All with my name, only my name. I slid them across the table like poker cards. This house is mine. If you're done, then you're done. But you're not living here. That's when he flipped. He jumped up, knocking his chair back so hard it left a dent in the wall. You're seriously kicking me out, after everything I've given you? He said it with his chest like I hadn't carried 90% of the weight of our entire relationship. I swear my jaw almost hit the floor. What exactly have you given me, Kyle? I snapped. A second adult to babysit, More debt? A partner who can't even call the dentist without me holding his hand? My voice was shaking, half rage, half heartbreak. He started pacing like a caged animal. This is my home, too. My clothes are here, my stuff is here. You can't just throw me out like some stranger. I remember gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. You broke up with me, Kyle. You said you needed independence. Well, congratulations. You're about to get it. That's when he stormed into the living room and started shoving things into a duffel bag. Clothes, chargers, random crap. He was muttering the whole time, calling me cold, ungrateful, cruel. Then this part still makes my blood boil. He grabbed the framed photo of us from our trip to Colorado, the one we took at the top of Pikes Peak, and hurled it at the wall. Glass everywhere. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there shaking but steady, while he melted down in my living room like a toddler denied candy. By midnight, he was gone, drove off in his crappy old Honda that barely starts, left skid marks in the driveway like he wanted to make a statement. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls and texts. First, it was begging, "Please, babe, I didn't mean it." Then it turned angry. "You'll regret this. You can't just erase me from your life like that." Then it went pathetic. "I'm sleeping in my car. How could you do this to me?" And the part of me that used to break and rush to fix things stayed quiet. I didn't reply, but I wasn't prepared for how fast he'd unravel without me. Do you want me to tell you what happened when he came back 2 days later? Because that's when things got really unhinged. 2 days later, I came home from work to find Kyle sitting on my front porch like some abandoned dog. Hoodie pulled up, duffel bag at his feet, a half-empty monster can in his hand. My stomach dropped the second I saw him because I knew he wasn't here to apologize. He was here to demand. "Lauren," he said, standing up way too fast, eyes wild like he hadn't slept. "We need to talk." I didn't even unlock the door. "There's nothing to talk about. You broke up with me. You don't live here anymore." That's when he lost it. He lunged forward and put his hand on the door frame, blocking me. "Don't do this, Lauren. Don't just toss me out like trash. I built a life here, too." I laughed. Couldn't help it. The audacity. "You didn't build anything, Kyle. You moved in. That's not the same thing." He clenched his jaw and his eyes went glassy. "You're heartless," he spat. "I gave you the best years of my life." "The best years of your life," I snapped. "Kyle, you've been unemployed for half of them. You think mooching off me was some kind of gift?" His face twisted into something ugly. Then he kicked over the flower pot by the door, the one my grandma gave me when I bought the house. Shattered it right there on the concrete. That was the first time my hand shook with fear instead of anger. I told him if he didn't leave, I'd call the cops. And you know what he did? He smirked. "Go ahead and tell them you're kicking your long-term boyfriend out. See how that looks." That was when I realized just how manipulative he could be. He wasn't just desperate. He was going to play dirty. Eventually he stormed off, yelling over his shoulder that I'd regret ruining his life. I locked the door, every muscle in my body trembling, and slid down against it until I was sitting on the floor trying to breathe. That night, I barely slept. Every car that passed outside made me sit up in bed, heart pounding. And sure enough, at 3 a.m., I heard something. Not inside, but outside. I peeked through the blinds, and there he was, parked across the street, lights off, just watching. I can't even describe how sick that made me feel. 6 years together, and now I was afraid of him. The next morning, my neighbor knocked and asked why some guy had been sitting in his car all night. I brushed it off, embarrassed, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. Kyle wasn't just sad. He was unraveling and dragging me into his spiral. I started documenting everything. The calls, the texts, the broken flower pot. My gut told me I'd need proof. And I was right, because the very next weekend, he broke into the backyard. Want me to tell you what went down that night? I came home that night, and the front door was unlocked. Not just ajar, wide enough that cold air and the smell of his cheap cologne pushed into the hallway like an accusation. My chest went hollow the second I saw the back gate swing. Footprints in the flower bed. My grandma's little ceramic gnome toppled over and face down, dirt smeared across its cheeks. I knew before I turned the corner, he'd been in the yard. He wasn't hiding. He was standing at the kitchen window, the silhouette of his hoodie hunched over like a weathered hound waiting for mercy. When he saw me, the shape of him snapped into something dangerous and small all at once. "You left your keys in the door," he said without moving. Calm in that way people get when they're trying to control the panic inside. Figured I'd come get a few things. "You're banned," I said. That felt like the only line left that had any power in it. "Leave now." He laughed, a wet, humorless sound, and for the first time I saw how hollow his threats always were. He pushed past me, shoulder to shoulder, and reached for the kitchen drawer where I kept the house manual and our seldom-used router box. I stepped in front of him. "Don't touch that," I warned. He shoved me hard enough that I hit the counter. A strip of my hand sliced on the edge and hot, stupid blood bloomed. He didn't stop. I grabbed the hem of his hoodie and pulled him toward me, not to fight but to keep him from moving. He shoved back and the duffel at his feet ripped open, a scattering of his things. Old job applications, a dented lighter, a framed Polaroid, tumbled across the tile. He went for the photo, the one with my mother's smile in the corner, and I saw red. This is the stupid human red where reasoning gets cut off. He swung the frame like a weapon and smashed it against the wall. Glass and plaster rained down. I lunged, grabbed the frame midair. It tore my palm worse. He shoved me again, backing away, eyes wild and wet. "You can't do this to me," he screamed. "You can't just—" I hit the phone with my elbow and called 911 with my voice steady for the first time in days. While the dispatch woman asked questions, he started smashing other things. The cheap lamp on the side table, a stack of my unpaid bills, which I'd been saving to show him he never paid half, and finally shoved over my grandmother's plant that survived 3 moves and 1 divorce and so many stupid promises. Police came. He begged and sobbed and told them the whole dramatic lecture about being thrown out, about how she made me do this. He lay down the guilt like a blanket. I handed over the folder with the deed and mortgage statements. My name, my signature, a paper trail so clean a judge could read it with one eye closed. When the officer asked if I wanted a trespassing and vandalism report filed, my throat tightened and I said yes. He left that night, but not on foot. He dragged a mattress to his car and slept in the driver's seat like a man dethroned. He texted at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4:12 a.m. The text morphed. "I need you, then I'll kill myself if you don't help me, then you monster." I screenshot everything, ordered a locksmith to change the outside lock, and went to work with bandaged hands and the kind of adrenaline that makes your voice brittle. That was the hinge. He thought eviction was the end. He was wrong. I started saving every voicemail, recording every new abusive message, collecting receipts for the damages he caused. I spent a long surgical night drafting an email, not to the cops, but to his mother, his sister, and his boss. Not accusatory, just a calm, clinical line of proof. His admitted break-ins, the police report number, screenshots of his threats, the photo of the smashed frame. I'm not petty enough to torch his life. I want something meaner and cleaner. Exposure. I want him to sit in the sober light and feel the ripple of his selfishness in the eyes of everyone who thought he was finding himself. I want his excuses echoed back to him like a verdict. Update. Holy. Some of y'all said burn the car. Tempting, not gonna lie, but also criminal. Others told me to call the cops. Did it? To get a restraining order. Filed the paperwork. And to post his texts everywhere. Nope. I didn't want to stoop to revenge porn. A lot of you suggested one sweet move. Show. Don't shout. So I did. I sent a single surgical email with everything attached to 3 people in his life who actually still cared. His sister, his mother, and his supervisor. I hit send at 7:02 a.m., waited 30 seconds, and felt something unnameable shift. Some comment said, "Don't be cruel," and honestly. I thought about that. Then I remembered the plant my grandma gave me, my palms bleeding, and the sound of him laughing as if he'd earned the right to wreck me. This is where it begins. The responses came quicker than I expected. His sister was the first to reply, just one line. "Finally, thank you for proving what we've known for years." That hit me sideways. Turns out even his own blood had clocked his chaos long before I cut him off. She followed it up a few hours later with screenshots of her own, texts from him begging her for money, rants about how I smothered him, voice notes where he was clearly drunk, crying about being a failure. She said, "He's been spiraling for months. You're not crazy. You just stopped playing babysitter." Then his boss emailed me back. This one was ice cold. He thanked me for bringing troubling behavior to light, and said Kyle's position was under review. He didn't even bother hiding it. Apparently Kyle had already been skating on thin ice at work, calling out sick constantly, missing deadlines. The fact that I handed over his midnight death threats and police reports, that was the nail in the coffin. And his mom? Oh, she called me. Not emailed. Called. First thing she said was, "Why would you do this to him?" The gall. Like I hadn't just survived her son smashing my lamp and bleeding me across my own kitchen. I told her calmly, "I didn't do this to him. I just stopped protecting him." She went silent, then started crying, real guttural sobs that didn't sound like a mother mourning her son's mistakes, but like someone realizing her golden boy's shield had shattered. The fallout was fast. Kyle showed up the next night, red-eyed, furious. He pounded on the door until my neighbor came out with his phone recording. "She ruined me!" Kyle screamed, voice breaking. "She told my boss, my family, she ruined everything!" He kicked the porch rail so hard the wood splintered. My neighbor told him he was on camera and that the cops were already called. Kyle bolted before they arrived, but not before shouting one last thing. "If I can't have a home, you don't get peace either." That line stuck in my chest like a nail, and he meant it. Because the next week was pure hell. Anonymous notes left under my windshield wiper. Late night calls from block numbers where no one spoke. Just heavy breathing. My tires slashed. Twice. And every time I reported it, the cops shrugged, told me unless I caught him in the act, there wasn't much they could do beyond the restraining order. I started carrying pepper spray just to check my mail. My safe little house felt invaded, poisoned by the ghost of someone I once trusted. But here's the thing about ghosts. They fade when the light shines hard enough. And I had one more move left. One sweet surgical piece of revenge that would cut him deeper than any broken lamp or car window ever could. The plan wasn't cinematic. No stolen passwords, no petty vandalism in return. It was boring, surgical, and exactly the kind of thing that would humiliate him in the only place he cares about, other people's eyes. I started small in public. I made copies of the police report, screenshots of the "I'll kill myself" texts, the voicemail where he sobbed and begged and then turned venomous, the photo of the broken frame with my mother's face half buried under glass. I printed them and put them in a neat little packet with a one-sentence cover letter. He lives in his car behind 42 Elm. He's been here since 9/2. FYI. Then I walked door to door with the neighbor who'd already seen him sleeping in his Honda every night and asked if they'd sign one of the 2-page witness statements I'd typed up. Most were sick of being awake at 3 a.m. by his pacing in the knocks. One old man who'd watched him sit cross-legged on the curb said, "Finally, someone's doing something." I felt sick and oddly triumphant at the same time. Next move. The community center where my company sponsors the weekend youth soccer program. I'd volunteered to organize a small potluck there. An excuse to gather people who mattered in our circles. Neighbors, a couple of clients, his supervisor, who'd said "under review" over email, and, crucially, his sister, who told me she'd come only if she saw the receipts. I set up a table with lemonade and brownies and tucked between paper plates the packets of evidence. I didn't announce anything. I let them read. He came, of course. He thought he could swagger in, pull the classic wounded act, and charm his way back. Instead, he walked into quiet. His sister was there, face like stone. His boss sat on the bleachers with his arms folded, and 3 neighbors I'd asked to come were talking in low voices by the trash cans. He started with the usual begging, voice hollow. "I was wrong. I'll get help, please." Then I played his voice message out loud, speakerphone on, the whole park hearing the slurred pleading that slid into threats halfway through. I read the police summary aloud. His sister stood up and said to the small crowd and to him, "You used to be funny. Now you're dangerous." People murmured. The boss told him quietly he was relieved to have enough to let HR go through the file. The crowd's pity turned to coldness. He tried to storm the stage, literally, and that's when he revealed he'd been sleeping in his car again. One of the neighbors, a burly contractor who'd helped me change my locks a week before, blocked him. Kyle shoved. The contractor shoved back. It became rough. Kyle grabbed a folding chair and swung. That was the moment someone called 911. He got arrested for assault on a private citizen and vandalism. The chair, the smashed picture frame already counted. The kind of public caught-on-camera nonsense that settles rumors into records. Update. Y'all wild day. Some of you DM'd advice about trolls and don't stoop to their level. Others told me to press charges and make sure he never comes near the house. I did both. His sister texted me later saying she didn't know how to thank me because she'd been terrified to help before. A few people said I was cruel. I sat with that and still think about my grandma's gnomon shards and my palm stinging from a glass. But watching him hauled away, chest heaving, eyes that finally saw how small he was without my protection, that felt like honesty served cold. He's living in his car. He yells sometimes when he drives by. He slashed my tires twice. Cops documented it. I saved the photos. I'm bruised in ways bandages won't fix, but the house is quiet now. The revenge wasn't fireworks. It was making sure the people who once saw the nice guy finding himself could also see the nights he spent pacing my lawn, the threats he leveled, and the truth that he had chosen to break things rather than grow. When Kyle got out on bail, he doubled down. I thought the community center scene would have been the final nail. That shame alone would keep him gone. Nope. Shame doesn't touch someone like him. It just makes him meaner. 2 nights later, I woke up to the sound of my motion lights snapping on. Heart in my throat, and I looked out the window. He was there. Not pacing, not shouting, just standing, staring up at my house like he was memorizing it, like he wanted to carve himself back into my walls. I called the cops again, but by the time they came, he'd driven off. I showed them the texts, the videos, the restraining order. They shrugged and said, unless he made direct threats of bodily harm in person, their hands were tied. That phrase, their hands were tied, became my new nightmare soundtrack. The next day, I found his car parked a block away. Inside, on the passenger seat, was the smashed frame from my kitchen, duct taped back together. He'd left it where I'd see it, like a sick calling card. That was my breaking point. I wasn't going to cower in my own home anymore. I called a locksmith again and had bars put on the back windows. I put up cameras with floodlights, and then I made a move I should have made months earlier. I filed for a full protective order, not just trespassing. Court was chaos. He showed up looking like a wreck. Unkempt beard, clothes that smelled like sweat and fast food grease. He begged the judge, "She's my life, I just need another chance." Then when the judge reminded him about the threats and vandalism, he pivoted into rage. "She's lying! She manipulated all this! She's ruining me!" He slammed his hands on the table so hard the bailiff actually stepped in. The judge didn't blink. Granted me the order on the spot. No contact, no coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. Kyle lost it. Tried to shout over the ruling until they dragged him out of the courtroom. That should have felt like victory. But when I got home that night, I saw it. Spray painted in black across my garage door. Home wrecker. I just stood there, hands shaking, stomach in knots, because that word, that lie, wasn't just for me. It was meant for my neighbors, for anyone who drove past my house. He wanted me shamed, too, and that was when my revenge stopped being about justice. It became about reclaiming my space, my name, my peace. The next morning, I didn't scrub the spray paint off. I left homewrecker scrawled across my garage like a billboard. My neighbors saw it, slowed down in their cars, whispered to each other, and when they asked, I didn't hide. I pulled out the folder I'd been building for months. The screenshots, the police reports, the restraining order, photos of the smashed lamp, the slashed tires, and yes, the garage door. I showed everyone who asked. Kyle did this, I said flatly. The man who broke up with me because I was too supportive. The man who lived in my house for years without paying a dime. Word traveled fast. My neighbor across the street, the one who'd filmed him screaming on my porch, uploaded the video to Facebook. Within 24 hours, it had been shared more than 500 times. Kyle screaming, veins popping, calling me a monster while the caption read, "This is what Lauren's been dealing with since kicking him out. She owns the house. He's stalking her." By the end of the week, his name was Mud. Not just with his family, who'd already pulled away, but with the entire town. His boss finally fired him, citing disruptive personal conduct. His landlord at the auto shop where he'd been parking his beat-up Honda told him to leave because people don't want your drama here. And then the kicker, his own sister. She took the same word he painted on my garage and used it in a Facebook post with the police report attached. Funny how Kyle calls her a homewrecker when the only home he ever wrecked was hers. The comments were brutal. Old friends, co-workers, even high school buddies dragged him. The narrative flipped completely. He wasn't some tragic ex-boyfriend. He was a violent, unstable parasite who destroyed the one person who ever cared about him. I finally painted over the word on my garage, but not before taking one last picture. I keep it printed and taped inside the folder with everything else, not because I need a reminder of the chaos, but because I want proof of how far I came. Now, my house is mine again, quiet, safe, sometimes too quiet, but peace takes getting used to. Kyle's still around. I see his car parked near the Walmart sometimes, but he doesn't come near me anymore. Not since the whole town saw him for what he is. People ask me if I regret it, if I regret exposing him so brutally, and honestly, no. He wanted to brand me as something ugly. Instead, I branded him with the truth. He's the home wrecker. He wrecked his own home, his job, his family, his reputation. And me? I finally get to live in mine.